What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So there's been a lot of talk around Nvidia and DLSS, especially with the Switch Pro back in the news, and we're talking about OLED and 4K and AI upscaling there. But yesterday we did have some news out of AMD talking about their own version of DLSS that apparently is heading to the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles, and that could have some serious implications on the generation that we're now in, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we're going to talk about some of the sales numbers that have come out of Famitsu in Japan around the Switch and Bravely Default 2's first week at retail. And I also wanted to touch on Super Nintendo World, specifically some of the locations opening outside of Japan, because it looks like we're going to have to be waiting just a bit longer. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Small Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Diablo 2 Resurrected, which is probably my favorite announcement out of BlizzCon that weekend. It was really cool to finally see this game announced, and obviously it hit everyone in the nostalgia bone. But it looks like if you had been playing Diablo 2, say, a year or two ago, or who knows, maybe like decades ago, you can actually go get your old character and bring them into the new game that they released later this year. This was in an interview with IGN from the game's producer, where they say, yes, keep your old save files. Back when we were working on the remaster, we wondered if the old save files would work, so we kind of shoved it in, and it worked. So yes, your local single-player save files will carry over, and I absolutely love this idea, just mostly because they are working towards that nostalgia factor and the idea that maybe there is a character you haven't used in years, and you can just kind of dust them off and drop them into this new version of Diablo 2 is a really, really cool idea. So hey, that means I guess you could even start up Diablo 2 now in anticipation and just move your character over. We'll see how easy that is to do, by the way. I'm hoping there's just a save import feature in the game and maybe just automatically detects it. Also, we did have the Mr. Sakurai Presents, where he showed off Pyra and Mythra, the new fighter, two different characters, but the new fighter for Smash Bros. Ultimate, and they are now out. They actually released last night. People were streaming all over YouTube, having a good time with this one, and I always like the Sakurai Presents, even though I'm not like really into Smash. It's interesting to see how Sakurai will explain the characters, his reasoning around like all these little details, and even some of his methods. For example, he decided to tell people that he orders figures for any of the different fighters they're working on, just so he can try to get a 360-degree view, even as far as the bottom of their shoes or their feet. But then he told everyone that he keeps a locked drawer that has the different figures that have not been announced yet, as in characters, which we have 2 left, that no one knows about outside of him and I guess a couple of people at Nintendo and then some of the developers, which probably wasn't the best thing to let people know about, because you might want to check that locked drawer tomorrow, Sakurai. But what's really interesting about all of this, there was the Smash Brothers effect. It's something we saw with Xbox in Japan, where he got that trending. But if you go on eBay, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Torna the Golden Country shot up in price. I see like sealed copies of Torna, which already was a discounted release in terms of its price. It wasn't full price. It was what, $40, I believe? That's like over $100 now. But either way, Pyra and Mythra out now. Go check them out. Oh, and it looks like Valve is throwing in the towel on Artifact. This was a game that they released in 2018. It's supposed to be around like their Dota franchise. It's like a card game that you play, similar, I guess, to like Hearthstone, but there were a few issues that they ran into when it came to the in-game economy and even just the startup fee, I guess we'll call it. Check this out here. This was the headline from Engadget. Valve halts development on Artifact, makes it free for everyone. The company says the game hasn't attracted enough of an audience to justify more investment. And yes, the concurrent player count dropped badly on this one. So what they did was they took away like the $20 price for it, which it was a competitor to Hearthstone, but it also wasn't, because Hearthstone was free to play. And for some reason, Valve wanted you to pay them $20 to get Artifact to then also continue buying things in the game with actual money. Generally, when people get a free-to-play game, they understand that, okay, they're letting you in for free so that you will then keep paying them money. Usually, if there is an upfront cost, when you get to the microtransactions and other stuff, that becomes very annoying, and it appeared that they were actually pretty aggressive with it in Artifact. So there's no more upfront fee, but they're also not going to do any more updating. So I guess technically you could just go check it out now. Just don't expect any new cards or anything to come out. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with AMD FidelityFX Super Resolution. It's their version of Nvidia's DLSS, or their deep learning super sampling, which is a way for Nvidia to AI upscale different images in games. So rather than have to run at a native resolution, you run at a lower resolution, and then the image is essentially reconstructed, and sometimes, really now, it looks better than native resolution. It's something Nvidia is really pushing now, specifically like smaller text and other objects in the game. It'll just appear overall cleaner. But AMD's been kind of lagging behind with this whole thing on their side. In a recent video though, Linus Tech Tips did talk about what's going on here with AMD and their plans for this super resolution, and apparently it involves the newer consoles. Apparently, rather than rushing FidelityFX Super Resolution out the door on only one new top-end card, they want it to be cross-platform in every sense of the word. So they actually want it running on all of their GPUs, including the ones inside consoles, before they pull the trigger. It would have been nice to have it ready by the time the cards launched, but as we saw with Nvidia's DLSS 1.0 versus DLSS 2.0, it could be for the best. That referencing the idea that DLSS 1.0 wasn't great. It left kind of a bad impression, I think, for a lot of people, and that impression still carries over now to DLSS 2.0. 1.0 wasn't supported with a lot of games. It didn't give the frame rate boost that we see now, and the image quality really wasn't that great. It was easily beaten out by the native resolution that you would run at, whereas now people have a very difficult time telling that they are having their images in their game AI upscaled. It is impressive stuff now what Nvidia has done, and they continue to work on things here. So naturally, we would assume that AMD would be doing something very similar, which they are with super resolution, but they have kind of a broader sense of things. Apparently, they want their super resolution to work on all different types of video cards in mobile, in their mobile GPUs as well. Intel, they want it also to work on Nvidia's cards. It's all over the place right now. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I guess it's a good thing because then it'll be more widely adopted. It will end up in these consoles, which could be very, very big. But at the same time, there's a lot to account for there. Whereas Nvidia is they have a pretty narrow path right now with which cards you need that would work with DLSS 2.0. However, super resolution going to the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S would be pretty big because it could effectively replace the need for a mid-generation refresh. I mean, we got the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X because 4K really caught on, and they felt the need to introduce these mid-generation refreshes in order to accommodate these 4K sets that were making their way more and more into people's homes. But let's say AMD really knocks out of the park with this super resolution, which still remains to be seen. If these systems can AI upscale to like 4K and maintain like 60 frames per second, that might be good enough for a lot of people. Then let's say 8K catches on midway through. Maybe the AI upscaling methods get so good that you can manage that 8K resolution that's upscaled to without losing that much visual quality, and they can make it an entire 7 years on the current systems, except they'll probably maybe have a few slim revisions, something like that, but they won't have to significantly upgrade the hardware, which would lead to a more profitable generation for Sony and Microsoft, and one that might even get cheaper for us as we go along. And AMD is not the only one who's really interested in trying to have these advanced AI upscaling techniques used for these systems. Microsoft's been researching this for years now, presenting some of their findings at different conventions and conferences, and they're kind of working the Xbox Series X and even the S, which, don't forget about the S, by the way, $300. What if that had its own AI upscaling technique to get it to 4K overall? That could be a very compelling price tag there for a system that would be able to do that. But Microsoft has been pushing this for a while as well, and even some of the technology inside the Series X specifically seems to be leaning towards Microsoft really looking towards that kind of a future. But let me know what you guys think about the idea of AMD introducing this and maybe Microsoft doing something similar on their side alongside of AMD. A lot of possibilities here that could keep your launch day PS5 or your launch day Xbox Series X relevant all the way through a 7-year generation. Next up, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts from this past week that does show us the launch sales of Bravely Default 2. Let's head over here to the top 10, where we can see at the top, Story of Seasons had a big time opening at 202,000 units. That's actually pretty good for Story of Seasons there. Bravely Default 2 was at number 2, 93,000 units. That's unfortunately below both Bravely Default 1, which is about 140,000 units in its first week, and then Bravely second, that was just over 100,000 units. But we'll see how Bravely Default 2 continues as we go along through the next few months. Then we have Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury at number 3, Momotaro at 4. That most likely will cross the 2 million mark next week. So impressive stuff there for Konami in Japan with that release. Ring Fit Adventure, then we have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Prince Sama, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and then Minecraft at number 10. Moving down to the hardware here, we have the Nintendo Switch at 78,000 units. That is up almost 4,000 units from the previous week. But check this out. The PlayStation 5 ended up getting some more stock as it jumped up to 33,000 units. Then we have the PS4 at 3,217. The Xbox Series consoles also had its own bit of a stock increase here with 1,487. That is up a little over 1,200 units from week to week. That's good stuff there. And then the 3DS down to 673. We also had this from the UK that was posted up. I just want to throw this in here real quick while we're talking about the sales numbers. More than 3 million games consoles were sold in the UK last year, including over 450,000 PlayStation 5 systems, 310,000 Xbox Series consoles, and 1.5 million Nintendo Switch devices. Now, keep in mind, yes, the Switch sold more than double both the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles combined, but the Switch did sell for the entire year, whereas we had the PS5 and the Series consoles for like a month. But overall, the Switch continues to roll along in Japan, and while Bravely Default 2 is kind of trending downwards there, remember, we still have to account for digital sales. Those are all physical, and we've seen the Switch and really this generation now as we go along move more and more to the digital side of things. So we'll see if Square or even Nintendo announces any kind of sales numbers as we go along here, if they hit any major milestones with the games. I'm also very happy to see the PS5 get more stock in Japan as we can see the numbers start to go up there. And then of course the Xbox Series console. Still some demand there for the Xbox in Japan, which is good to see. All around a pretty good week. Next up, let's talk about the Avengers game, a game that most people have forgotten about by now, and that's a shame because it's a live service game, so it needs people to kind of remember that it exists. It released last September, and since then, it's just fallen off the radar on Twitter, everywhere. Just no one talks about it. So what do you do to get people back into your game? Do you release more content, more characters? No, you increase the experience between levels so that it's more of a grind. At least that appears to be the strategy they're doing in their latest update. We'll head over to their website here where they say XP rework. Since we launched last September, our balance team has been evaluating the XP curve for leveling from 1 to 50, and we'll be making some changes to address 2 core issues. The current XP curve isn't really a curve at all. In most RPGs, the amount of XP you need to level up increases as you gain levels in a curve, but our system is a straight line. This has led to pacing issues, such as skill points currently being rewarded too fast, which may be confusing and overwhelming to newer players. We want each decision to invest in a skill or heroic to be more meaningful. So they're basically going to increase the amount of experience needed to level up, starting from around level 25 and so on, just to kind of ramp up, I guess, more of a curve and not, as they say, a straight line, which is strange because you'll get that fatigue at times as you go through and you realize, which you will in Avengers, you're doing a very similar thing over and over again in that kind of a game. And the idea here is that when you get to the end game of a games as a service, it's supposed to get more fun, which tells me they have end game issues if they want to try to make that journey longer. They're saying that new people are getting too many cool things thrown at them at once, so they have to slow it down. It seems like a very weird and out there strategy, but like I said, I don't really see a lot of people playing it, and this just seems like a way to get less people to play it. So unless I'm missing something here, which if you are someone who is really into the Avengers game still, let me know if this one makes sense. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Super Nintendo World. In Japan, they did a soft opening for the Super Nintendo World that we saw in that Direct, and some of the videos that are coming out of that are awesome. That place looks so cool to go visit, go on the different rides, check everything out. It's a little mini adventure as you go through and do all those different stations that Miyamoto was showing off. And there are still some pretty cool things kind of hidden in there that he didn't show. But I'm not really going to be going to Japan anytime soon, so I was kind of scoping out the one that they were going to be putting together in Orlando in the US. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon as it's facing its own delays. And we can go over here to Polygon, where they say construction on Orlando's new Universal theme park has restarted following delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Originally slated to open in 2023, Epic Universe, which will include Orlando's own Super Nintendo World, is now scheduled to open in early 2025. And it's expected because of the pandemic and COVID-19. I'm sure construction in general was just put on pause for basically a year or so, and now we're looking at about a 4-year time period until they'll have it ready to go. And that's if everything stays on track. It could still fall behind and miss different deadlines and all of this based on how things continue to progress here. So, I mean, we'll see on that front. It's just, like I said, I'm not going to Japan anytime soon, so I guess I'll kind of hang out and wait until 2025 and keep watching those YouTube videos that showed what looks like one of the coolest places ever to go visit. Before we check out the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up, where I asked, is the rumored 720p handheld resolution for a Switch Pro an issue? 43% said yes, it should be 1080p at the minimum, but 57% said no, I haven't had an issue with the current 720p resolution. And you know what? I feel like if Nintendo just put it out there with the OLED screen, let's say all of this is correct, and it's just this OLED screen at 720p and it's 7-inch screen, and they didn't say anything about resolution, I feel like no one would even mention it because I don't hear anyone mention that the current Switch screen is a problem for them when they're playing it, and OLED is a massive step up. So I will say I'd rather it be OLED at 720p than still be the LCD that they have at 1080p. I just think overall what you can get out of OLED would be significantly better. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Zach saying, Bloomberg to everyone, I promise it's for real this time, guys. Please believe me. They've been talking about Switch revision stuff for a while, but remember, they also talked about that Switch Lite that I think we were just calling what the Switch Mini at the time, so they were correct there. But Takashi Mochizuki has been with us since the start of the Switch, even a little before then, and he's published some stuff that was off. I think at one point he mentioned 1440p. This was before the Switch was like unveiled and all of this. So yeah, it's been touch and go with some of the reporting, but this one does seem to make sense based on some of the data mining we've had. So I'm actually leaning more towards this time they got it right. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's AMD's super resolution or the idea of AI upscaling possibly being our quote-unquote mid-gen refresh with the Xbox Series X and the PS5 as we go along there. Also, what do you think about Super Nintendo World? It's been delayed in the US, but let me know if you're planning out any trips, I guess, to Japan so you can go check the theme park out. Thanks, guys, for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.